let's talk about macaroni and cheese. Welcome back to Sprung On Food. I'm your host, Kae Sprung. This season, we're talking about favorite foods, the history behind it, and the role it plays in the world today. Joining me today is host of the As Told By podcast and digital content creator, Kahja Elliott. Kahja, welcome.
Thank you so much, Kang, for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here to talk about one of my favorite things.
Yes, and I'm excited to talk to you all about it. Let's talk about this favorite food of yours, mac and cheese. Tell me all about your relationship with it.
My goodness. Macaroni and cheese is like definitely a holiday staple. But, coming from family that has Southern roots, it could be really, any given Sunday, somebody would just bust out with a pan of macaroni and cheese. That always was like a signifier that we were moving the dinner bar up a little bit that particular night. So it's one of those things where when you see it, you're like, it's the right night.
So for you, it was more of like a special occasion meal.
It was a special occasion meal. So if it's graduations, weddings, holidays, people are coming over, families in town, we're gathering, baby shower. Someone was for certain going to break out a pan of mac and cheese. It was like a signifier of good times.
Yes, I like that. Do you have a family recipe? Tell me about the type that you particularly either love to eat or make. Which one do you fall between? Are you a maker, an eater, both?
So this is a funny story, right? Because there's a lot of treachery involved in the passing of recipes of mac and cheese. Some people swear by their formulation, and there's so many variations. So I started off as a mac and cheese eater, graduated into a mac and cheese maker. However, once I moved away from the East Coast and I wasn't at as many family celebrations, it is absolutely, or at least for me, is a use it or lose it skill. Like I would be nervous to make a pan of macaroni and cheese today because I'm like, okay, my technique might be a little bit rusty, but there is a loose recipe or just things that should be in the room. Of course, macaroni, and the kind is, debatable. People will fight you over which kind you get.
Well, what do you prefer?
The cheese, okay, I like a good elbow. To me, if we're going to be a traditionalist and keep it, to the origin story, I'm going to take an elbow.
Okay.
But, I have seen corkscrew. I see people throw shells in there every now and again, or even like mini penne. It's a house divided. Yes. But I like an elbow.
Fair enough. Elbow it is.
Start. So elbows are cool. And cheese, we could be here all day. There's just a lot of directions to go with the cheese.
Give me an example of perhaps your ideally prepared mac and cheese. Somebody is saying, let's even take it, not to be morbid, but like a last meal situation. And somebody says, all right, Kahja, here we are. We're doing your mac and cheese. What's your order?
All right. So number one, elbows. Elbow macaroni. That's where we're starting.
Elbows. Solid.
Number two, I'm going to the milk next. Now, for me, I like canned evaporated milk, not carton traditional milk. So canned evaporated milk has a little bit more creaminess to it. I could be cajoled into adding a little half and half, but more, by and large, canned evaporated milk for me and my family is where we're going. Here comes the slippery slope. You ready?
Yes, born ready.
Eggs. Now, this is, here's where you get into schism with people because baked macaroni, as I have always seen it made, includes eggs. And it might be two, depending on how large of a pan you're making. But eggs is a binder, as you probably know, and goes in baked macaroni and cheese. So egg is going in mine. We've got seasonings, salt, pepper, garlic powder is pretty standard for me. I fooled around with dry mustard. I'm not that girl.
Okay.
I may do dry mustard, but more than likely not going to be in there for me. And then we get to, the pièce de résistance. We get to the cheese. Now, I like cheddar.
Okay.
I like a mix. extra sharp, sharp, and medium. I
Oh,
used to be a girl that would buy a bag of pre-grated, but I'm not doing that anymore. I am grating cheese.
yes. Okay, you've really opened my world with both the evaporated milk. That is a new tip I was not familiar with, and then blew my mind with the eggs. This is fascinating.
Yeah. The eggs are polarizing because some people think mac and cheese is different schools, right?
Yes.
Mac and cheese is supposed to be creamy, where when you scoop, the spoon actually gives a scoop of a looser texture of macaroni. So this all comes down to what kind of texture do you want? Without
Mhm.
egg, you get a little bit of a looser texture. I feel like we're talking about terroir with wine, right?
I mean,
But you
listen,
get a little
you
bit of
could be
a
the
looser
sommelier
texture.
of mac and cheese here. First of their kind. Why not?
But with egg, that is where you see people almost go to the level like when you get a lasagna out and you get the spoon and you have to do that little cut out and then scoop. So it's a
Yes.
little bit closer to like a macaroni pie or baked spaghetti, that kind of thing.
Aha.
It's in how much egg you use and also how long you bake it, because it's a fine balance. You don't want it too tight, because if it's too tight, it's dry. If
Mm.
it's loose, you might as well be at the sizzler. So
Yeah,
it's somewhere
fair.
in the middle. We're
Oh
trying to
my,
find an even ground.
this is spectacular. And is this a formulation and recipe that you have just been making and come to love, or was this passed down?
So this was, I don't know if I would say it was passed down, but I actually, I definitely have watched family members make it. And so maybe we were like passing through, osmosis, passing through, just watching. But I would watch people, and, if you see it enough over the course of events, over the course of your life, eventually you're kind of like, all right, I know how this goes. And it's hard to measure ratios. How many cans of evaporated milk? Well, depends on how much cheese, depends on how much elbow macaroni, and then every now and again, you'll have a family member who'll do what I call the remix, Kay. They'll
Oh,
throw in things like sour cream,
oh,
cream cheese. My favorite thing, which is just, a lot of debate around this, Velveeta.
mm.
Hmm.
Okay. I mean, especially knowing
Yes.
how passionate you were about grating your own cheese, I can only imagine what that does to your soul.
I've not personally made it with Velveeta, but I understand the Velveeta school of thought because, when you shred cheese is melted throughout the sauce, right?
Mhm.
When you cube Velveeta, you create these pockets when you bake it where you bite into cheese versus like cheese just being dispersed
Right.
in the sauce. Like, what kind of mac and cheese experience are you trying to have? Do you want like all smooth and, running throughout, or do you want to also bite down into pieces of cheese? It's very technical.
Yes, you have to do almost a choose your own adventure of mac and cheese and then decide accordingly. You have given
Okay.
me new recipe ideas, new iterations I didn't know about. And also,
That's
I
good.
think
Oh,
that,
wait, I left out the butter. I left
oh,
out the
never,
butter. Don't
don't leave
forget the
out the
butter.
butter. Don't forget the butter.
No.
Is the butter going into the whole thing? Are you doing like pads of butter on the top to kind of just get in there? At what point is the butter going in?
So, like quick logistics, right? You boil the pasta, you drain the pasta, you
Yes,
put the pasta back into the hot pan, and then you add in your stick of butter or however much butter you're using.
sure.
But
Depends
you
on the other
add in,
ingredients.
stir it up. Oh, now it's melted. Then that's when I go in with seasonings. Then that's when I go ahead and pour in the cans of milk, right? So now you're
Ah,
pouring in enough milk so that you almost have covered the macaroni with milk, but it's kind of swimming in there, and the butter and the seasonings are getting ingratiated now into that milky liquid. And then you start going in with your grated cheese. And because the pan and the pasta has retained some heat, and you're stirring, and it starts to melt down the cheese. It won't melt completely, but it does start to melt down the cheese. And then you just toss that whole mix into your buttered pan. And then you go in and you sprinkle cheese on top. You can do a breadcrumb if you want to, like toast up some panko and throw that on there. I would do that if I was trying to be like extra fancy, but just regular schmegular. I would sprinkle that grated cheese on top, and into the oven we go at a high temp because the macaroni is already cooked. So you're really just trying to get that sauce to come together.
This is great. Thank you for sharing that. Now that I understand your version, your ideal spectacular version of macaroni and cheese, to better appreciate our food, we've got to know where it came from. So, let's set the scene. It's the 13th century in Italy. That's right, before Kraft, before the instant powder packets, pasta and cheese were already making history. Italian nobility and later even French royalty started pairing pasta with rich cheese sauces. These dishes were simple but indulgent, enjoyed at royal banquets and by aristocrats. One of the earliest records of this cheesy dish dates back to a cookbook from 14th century Naples, where cheese was used with pasta in baked casseroles. So far, Kahja, what do you think of mac and cheese starting as such like an elegant dish that was looked at so sophisticatedly?
Well, first of all, that makes me want to time travel. I'm like, oh, okay, what is macaroni of the day? What does that look like? But it makes me wonder, of course, there may have been some limitations on cheese selections. Not like today, we could pull up to, a counter and have all of these options available. So I wonder, were they doing like cow's milk cheese? Were they doing sheep's or goat's milk cheese? Those could have been some really interesting variations. That
Yes,
would make it a little fancier than what we kind of know it to be.
this is true. Yes. If we could
Mm.
only travel back in time, as soon as that technology comes about, I think our first mission should go have some of this ancient mac and cheese. I'm down.
Absolutely. Our magic time portal.
Well, the recipe didn't stop there. Like any great recipe, it traveled, this time to England. By the 1700s, the British had taken the idea and created macaroni pudding, a mix of cheese, cream, and pasta that was baked until golden. The dish was so popular, it was served at feasts and even inspired songs and poems. Kaja, can you think of any songs that feature macaroni?
Any songs that feature macaroni? Not right off the top of my head. I know there's this phenomenon with people equating the sounds it makes when you're stirring up macaroni to things that are completely unassociated with mac and cheese.
Oh
But there
dear.
are no songs that I can think.
Well,
There's no song I can think of right off that deals with that.
well, let me see if this sparks your memory. Let's take a quick detour. It's the 1760s in London, and a group of young men with an insatiable love for style, drama, and all things extravagant decide to form an elite club. They call it the Macaroni Club. Why? Because macaroni was an exotic food in England back then, fancy, foreign, and undeniably trendy. So naturally, they adopt the name, strut around in wigs the size of small bushes, and revel in being the most fashion-forward bunch in town. Soon enough, macaroni becomes shorthand for a man who is very, very concerned with his appearance. A dandy, if you will. If someone called you a macaroni in 18th century England, they weren't saying you liked pasta. They were saying you were extra. We're talking peacocking levels of style. So, how did this term end up in the patriotic American song Yankee Doodle? When the British soldiers were feeling cheeky, they made up a little ditty to poke fun at the scrappy Americans. They used macaroni as a punchline, suggesting that the Americans were trying too hard to be fashionable. Like a guy who thinks achieving high fashion by sticking a feather in his cap is clever, the British thought it was hilarious. The Americans, not so much. But here's where it gets good. Instead of being insulted, the Americans turned the song into a rallying anthem. They took the British jab and ran with it, singing Yankee Doodle proudly as they marched. Suddenly, the idea of macaroni wasn't something to sneer at. It became a symbol of defiant American spirit. So the next time you hum along, remember that feather in the cap isn't just a fashion statement, it's a badge of independence and a symbol of giving the British a taste of their own tea-flavored medicine. Kaja, were you familiar with this origin story?
Definitely not familiar with the story, but song, once you mentioned it, I'm like, of course, that's right. Stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. But the story was new to me. I did not know that the term macaroni was on par with doing the most.
You know what? Before this, neither did I. So we both learned a little bit of something. I always just thought they were talking about the food, and I didn't understand how a macaroni noodle looked like a feather. He had quite an imagination, but now this makes a lot more sense.
Brings it all home.
Now, let's get back to the actual food. It's the late 18th century, and macaroni and cheese finds itself on a whole new continent. The story goes that Thomas Jefferson, America's third president, encountered the dish on a trip to France. He fell in love with that so much that he brought back a pasta machine and began serving it at state dinners. Talk about a presidential endorsement. But then things really shift. It's the 1930s. The Great Depression is raging and money's tight. Enter a clever salesman named Grant Leslie in St. Louis, Missouri. Legend has it, he had a eureka moment. Slap a pack of grated Kraft cheese onto a box of pasta with a rubber band, and voila! America's first convenience mac and cheese was born. It was a meal that even the toughest times couldn't sour, and it quickly caught on like, well, cheese on a hot noodle. Before long, Kraft got wind of this genius and decided to give it the big box treatment. 1937, Kraft hit the scene with their boxed macaroni and cheese. Their slogan, make a meal for 4 in 9 minutes. Talk about efficiency. For just 19 cents, you could feed your whole family a box of gooey goodness, ideal for those times when dinner needed to be fast, filling, and, well, cheap. Kraft mac and cheese quickly became America's go-to for instant comfort in a box, a culinary hug when the wallet was running on empty. And then World War II, and our beloved blue box really took off. With meat, milk, and other staples on tight rationing, Kraft mac and cheese was a hit because it didn't require much more than water and a touch of hunger. Soldiers, family, and anyone who liked the idea of minimal effort fell in love with the cheesy wonder. It was also shelf-stable, perfect for the times when fresh food wasn't an option. During the war, Kraft sold over 50 million boxes, proving that when the going gets tough, the tough eat mac and cheese. Kahja, what do you think of the transformation so far of this all starting out as a very fancy food made to impress, as something trimmed down made to just survive?
Listen, it's scalability at its finest. You got to scale that thing when we get into wartime and rations on food. So, amen to them being able to like distill actual cheese into cheese powder. I heard you say a family of 4, and I'm like, okay, times and stomachs have definitely changed because I don't know what 4 people. That sounds like a fight. I don't know what 4 people a box of Kraft macaroni and cheese we're gonna feed today, but amen to being able to get that process from this to this so that you can move that into as many hands as possible. I love it.
Yes, the ingenuity. Well, with
Yeah.
peacetime came prosperity, and Kraft didn't miss a beat. In the 1950s, they started airing TV commercials, beaming images of smiling families digging into bowls of the cheesiest. As more households got TVs, Kraft mac and cheese wormed its way into the hearts and kitchens of families everywhere. By the 70s, it was no longer just a pantry staple, it was practically a family member. And in Canada, it became known as Kraft Dinner, or simply KD, a rite of passage, a national treasure for kids and college students alike. Fast forward to the 90s, and Kraft mac and cheese was going strong, riding a wave of comfort food nostalgia. Kraft got creative with new shapes, Hello Dinosaurs and SpongeBob, and easy-to-microwave cups that made it a snack of choice for college kids pulling all-nighters. Kraft had leveled up from a quick family meal to an all-out phenomenon. By the 2010s, consumer tastes were shifting. The neon orange powder that had once been the pride of Kraft was starting to raise some eyebrows. So, in 2015, Kraft went undercover, quietly swapping out the artificial dyes and preservatives for natural ones like turmeric and paprika. The best part? They didn't even tell anyone at first, wanting to be sure people wouldn't notice the difference. And guess what? Most people didn't. The beloved taste stayed the same, but now with colors that came from nature. Win-win. Were there any other brands that came later of either microwavable or other boxed makers that you liked or think maybe make it better than Kraft?
If I'm going to say better, I think their closest competitor might have been like when Velveeta themselves got into the market
Mm-hmm.
of box mac and cheese. I think those were like the two that were gunning for the number one spot. And Velveeta came in the door with the cream sauce, right? I don't remember Velveeta ever having powder. So I could see they came in and tried to say, we're going to take this to the next level, which made Kraft say, we're going to get a cream sauce and we're going to take it to the next level too. So it's
Mm-hmm.
fun to watch them battle it out for the number one spot. And then you have, to me, the brands that are right under that, the Annie's and the ones that are, geared towards being organic and a little bit more healthy. And then you get down to, the packets, Knorr, and good old Noodle Roni that have their variations of mac and cheese as well. I like to stay on that top tier. I like Kraft and or Velveeta. I'll take whichever one you got. I'll even do the shells, even though I don't cook them.
We'll
But for
deviate from the
Velveeta and
elbows to the
Kraft,
shells. Yes.
I'll deviate from the elbows to the shells. And you know, the ingenuity of Kraft sticking with that powder formulation, even though they introduced another version, it gave people versatility because I have taken that packet and used it on popcorn. So you flex it. You flex your ingredients. If I wanted a little bit of cheddar flavor on butter popcorn, and you do that, and the packet then takes on a whole new life. So like, don't be limited with your mac and cheese.
Oh my gosh, the variations, the genius behind this. It's not just a one-trick pony. This is amazing.
Get your money's worth.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Well, today, macaroni and cheese is everywhere, from humble boxed versions to gourmet dishes in five-star restaurants. Chefs and foodies have taken the classic comfort dish and given it new life, adding truffle oil, lobster, jalapenos, or baking it with crispy breadcrumbs. In the US and Canada, mac and cheese is even celebrated with festivals and cook-offs where fans gather to try endless variations. And let's not forget social media, the perfect playground for crazy mac and cheese mashups. TikTok and Instagram have seen everything from mac and cheese pizza to deep fried mac and cheese balls. And let's be honest, those cheese balls, they're pure viral gold. So the next time you take a bite of mac and cheese, remember, you're eating a dish with centuries of history and a story that's still being written. Whether it's in a box, baked from scratch, or served with a twist, it's here to stay. Kaja, are there any moments in pop culture or modern society where you think that macaroni and cheese really made its mark?
I really loved in like modern society when we started to see mac and cheese show up in these very fancy places, like at weddings and at banquets, and they would have it in martini dishes, and they would have mac and cheese bars where you could add, chives and bacon and green onions and lobster and all of these toppings, to the point of what you were saying. I liked that they would present it as the staple, but they would give people the optionality to kind of make it what they wanted it to be. And, fast forward, like you said, I've been to restaurants where the entire menu is just all of these different varieties of mac and cheese.
Do
And
you
it's
know
it's
what
been
the name of
great.
that restaurant is?
Yes, it's here in Oakland. It's called Homeroom.
Oh my gosh.
Homeroom. It is nothing but mac and cheese. They've got Mac the Goat is my favorite one. It's a goat cheese themed mac and cheese, but they have all these mixes. You can add all kind of add-ons to it. So that is a place to go if you definitely want to like nerd out on mac and cheese.
Oh, that's a good plug for them. Oh, wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, it's almost as if we've really kind of gone full circle with macaroni and cheese, where it really started as such an elegant, beloved, regal dish that was meant for royalty, nobility, and then transformed itself kind of by default and by the genius of one entrepreneur in St. Louis and became a staple just to feed yourself out of necessity, and then into quick, easy fixes in the college dorm room. And now it's come to that full circle moment where now it's elevated again. It shows itself in all of these different celebrations, as you were saying earlier too, kind of how you enjoy it. It's more of an occasion, and you know that there's something special happening when you have that mac and cheese on the table and seeing it in weddings. And elevating the ingredients and really getting creative with it, it's gone 360.
Absolutely. And even with all those changes, for me, it is just still always something that is so comforting, like to a lot of people, it's known as a comfort food, but it is always something that reminds me so much of family and traditions and special occasions. So, going out and enjoying all of these really creative formulations, it's always nice. Give me the truffle oil, the roasted garlic, all the things. But at the end of the day, I'm going to always be like a basic Sunday mac and cheese girl.
I love it. Don't mess with a classic. Well, Kahja, thank you for sharing your love of mac and cheese and helping me share the story.
Feel educated. There's so many factoids that I have now that I'm just going to randomly be sprinkling on people at the next family occasion when someone pulls out a pan. I'll be sure to take them all the way back like you took me.
Oh, yes. Spread the word. Let everybody know all about mac and cheese. And I'm glad I could contribute to that. Thanks for watching. You can find links and more info in the description below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. See you next time.